is News Bits on Fuxion TV. Here are the headlines. Trial date set in Egypt for charged journalists. Rights group warns of ethnic cleansing in Central African Republic. 3-day mourning declared in Algeria as dozens are killed in military plane crash. U.S. warns of possible terror threat in Uganda. South Africa to deploy technology to improve election credibility. Snow on ground in 49 out of 50 states in the U.S. These and more when we return. Stay tuned, we'll be back in a minute. Hello and welcome to News Bits on Fuxion TV. I'm Nike Roberts. Prosecutors in Egypt have charged 20 journalists to court whose trials will begin February 20th. The charges include joining and aiding a terrorist organization and endangering national security. Those on trial include 16 Egyptians and 4 foreigners. And those charged include Al Jazeera's Egyptian-Canadian Cairo bureau chief Adel Fahmy and Australian Peter Grest. They are accused of collaborating with the Egyptians by providing them with money, equipment, information, and airing false news aimed at informing the outside world that the country was witnessing a civil war. Al Jazeera reportedly stated that the allegations are absurd, baseless, and false, and have demanded the unconditional release of the journalists, saying they were merely reporting the situation in Egypt. Mr. Grest, Mr. Fahmy, and a local Egyptian producer, Baha Mohammed, were seized in a raid at a Cairo hotel last December. The spiraling ethnic violence in the Central African Republic has led some observers to fear another genocide like that seen in Rwanda nearly 20 years ago. The minority Muslim population is being targeted in a relentless wave of coordinated violence that is forcing entire communities to leave the country. Human rights group Amnesty International in a report said international peacekeepers must do more to protect Muslim communities. Also, that the backlash against Muslim civilians was foreseeable and should have been prevented. The Central African Republic, a former French colony, was plunged into chaos last year after a coalition of mostly Muslim rebels called Seleka ousted President Francois Bozize. In power for nearly 10 months, the Seleka rebels were responsible for massacres, extrajudicial executions, rape, torture, and looting, as well as massive burning and destruction of Christian villages. Since being forced out of power, Christian militias known as the Anti-Balaka have been allowed to fill the vacuum of power, with dire consequences for Muslim civilians. The UN Security Council voted last month to continue its peacekeeping mission in the country and to authorize the use of force by European Union troops stationed there. Algeria started 3 days of mourning Wednesday for the 77 people killed when a military transport plane crashed. Communication with the crew was lost between the cities of Constantine and El Bouaghi, and the C-130 Hercules aircraft went down while approaching the city of Constantine. One person reportedly survived the crash and is being treated for head injuries at a military hospital in Constantine. The Defense Ministry said it had set up a commission to investigate the crash and in a statement blamed very bad weather conditions involving a storm and heavy snowfall for the crash. A Rwandan ex-paramilitary police chief found guilty of genocide by a UN-backed war crimes tribunal has been acquitted on appeal. General Augustin Dindilimana was already free as his sentence was the 11 years he spent in custody awaiting trial after his arrest in Belgium in the year 2000. He was one of the most senior figures to be sentenced by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR. The judgment noted that General Dindilimana had limited command over the gendarmerie after April 6, 1994. General Dindilimana has reportedly been living in an ICTR safe house in Arusha, Tanzania since his release nearly 3 years ago. He is unable to return to Rwanda, and no other country has yet agreed to take him, although he has hopes to join his family in Belgium. South African President Jacob Zuma announced last week the country will hold its 5th national general elections on May 7th, following consultations with senior officials at the IEC. IEC spokesperson Kate Bapella announced Parliament has amended the country's law for the first time allowing diaspora voting. This new law will enable South Africans living abroad to register and vote at embassies near them. Bapella called this a watershed legislative amendment while confirming that the IEC had received more than 3,000 applications of South Africans that were registered in various missions in all the countries where South Africa is represented. Some of the new technologies, according to Bapella, that the IEC will deploy during the May election include a handheld scanner which will scan an individual's ID to give a profile of who they are, and equipment that scans voter forms that helps determine their voting stations. She says IEC records shows that there has been a surge in voter registration in South Africa as the electoral body compiles a voters list to be used for the election. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the United States continues to work towards obtaining and maintaining peace and security in Africa, as well as promoting development initiatives. Speaking in Washington Tuesday while attending a welcome ceremony for French President François Hollande, Kerry said the United States was trying to build the capacity of security forces in the Central African Republic to deal with the violence that broke out following a March 2013 coup by Seleka rebels. He said efforts to disarm militant group M23 continued in the Democratic Republic of Congo and that a special envoy has been sent to South Sudan, where thousands of civilians have been killed since fighting broke out between government and rebel forces in December 2013. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs Linda Thomas-Greenfield said while such peace building was important, Africa was more than sporadic violence. She noted that there are 40+ other countries in Africa where there is not fighting and there is not war, saying we need to build on the successes of these countries and help those countries that are having problems get out of trouble. The U.S. Embassy in Uganda has warned of a possible terrorist attack in the country's capital, Kampala. In a message released late Monday, the embassy said it had received information that a group of attackers is possibly in place and ready to strike targets inside Kampala in February or March. The statement said there are indications that the Ugandan National Museum is one of the potential targets. Uganda police have placed security officers on high alert. Judith Nabakuba, Uganda Police National Spokesperson, stated that the police are working with other security agencies as well as private security groups to thwart any possible terror attack. The Somali militant group Al-Shabaab carried out a bombing in Kampala in July 2010 that killed more than 70 people. A Liberian has been made the head of Liberia's army for the first time since civil war ended more than 10 years ago. On Tuesday, Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf confirmed Lieutenant Colonel Daniel D. Zian Khan as a Chief of Staff of the new Armed Forces of Liberia. This is the first time a Liberian has taken command of the country's military since the former army was disbanded in 2003, following more than a decade of civil war. The UN mission in Liberia, UNMIL, has been in charge of security in the country since August 2003, following a ceasefire that ended Liberia's second civil war. UNMIL began a drawdown of its military presence in 2007 and has been gradually handing over responsibility to Liberian security forces. Associate Professor Dorina Biko at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies said, "This is quite significant for Liberia and is a great source of pride for the Liberian military in terms of concretely showing how far they have come and what the army represents and who makes up the army." The Barbados government and the United States have agreed to start negotiations with respect to an intergovernmental agreement that will give effect in Barbados to the provisions of the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FATCA, a U.S. federal law. International Business Minister Donville Innes disclosed recently during a press conference that FATCA which was enacted in 2010 by the U.S. Congress to target non-payment of federal taxes by U.S. taxpayers who utilize foreign accounts for this purpose, requires foreign financial institutions to report to the U.S. Internal Revenue Service, IRS, information about financial accounts held by U.S. taxpayers or by foreign companies in which U.S. taxpayers hold a controlling interest. Countries that refuse to comply could run the risk of causing their financial institutions to be subjected to a 30% withholding tax on both income and capital from the U.S. sources. The government of Barbados established a negotiating team headed by the Central Bank of Barbados and Invest Barbados, comprising both private and public sector representatives, to advise on the most efficacious way to proceed. A 4-year, €5.2 million project to assist Caribbean community member states move towards renewable energy technologies is the focus of discussion at CARICOM Secretariat headquarters in Guyana. Representatives of member states and other key stakeholders in the community's energy sector are charting the way forward for a renewable energy and energy efficiency project funded by the German government through the German Society for International Cooperation, GIZ. The CARICOM German Government Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Technical Assistance Project, RETA, will explore the use of solar energy, wind power, bioenergy, and hydropower for energy cost savings in many areas, including for businesses and households. The RETA project will also seek to build capacity in the private sector for implementing renewable energy and energy-saving measures, and will also support the CARICOM Energy Program and regional organizations involved in sustainable energy development. Marina Muse, the GIZ resident director for the Caribbean, pointed out that the RETA project was the outcome of long-term cooperation in energy in the region. The project will be administered from the CARICOM Secretariat in Guyana, and all member states will have an opportunity to identify areas to be supported through the project. Many CARICOM countries have commenced various sustainable energy efforts, and the RETA project will build on these, as well as build on the achievements of the Caribbean Renewable Energy Development Program, CREDIP. Together, the CREDIP and RETA projects amount to €15.7 million, making the German government the single largest contributing partner to CARICOM's sustainable energy development. The Caribbean Community CARICOM has joined other key stakeholders in expressing concern over the continuing delay in Guyana's progress in implementing recommendations to address deficiencies in its anti-money laundering regime. CARICOM issued a statement calling on all parties involved in the process to take all necessary actions without further delay to have the necessary reforms implemented. CARICOM remains deeply concerned that failure to pass the Anti-Money Laundering Combating the Financing of Terrorism Bill amendment in Parliament could result in action by the Financial Action Task Force, which could have an adverse effect on the Guyanese economy and by extension the CARICOM region as a whole. 4 ministers in Nigeria were fired Wednesday from the Federal Executive Council by the President, Goodluck Jonathan. These include the Minister of Aviation, Ms. Stella Odua, Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Mr. Godsday Orubebe, Minister of Police Affairs, Navy Captain Caleb Olubolade, and the Minister of State for Finance, Dr. Yerima Nagama. All ministers, with the exception of Stella Odua, were in attendance at the FEC meeting at which Jonathan announced their exit. Ms. Odua had been in the center of controversy since last year over the purchase of 2 bulletproof BMW cars for ₦255 million on her behalf by a government agency under her ministry. Apart from the amount spent on the cars, which was found to be grossly above the market value, the propriety of the purchase by an agency that was finding it difficult to train key personnel responsible for aviation safety was queried. Many Nigerians have applauded President Goodluck Jonathan's decision to relieve Stella Odua of her job. Well, full moon for Valentine's Day today. February full moon is also tagged snow moon due to heavy snowfalls that occur in the month. Surprisingly, snow is on ground in 49 out of 50 states in the US, with Florida being the exception. Even Hawaii has snow on the peaks of the mountain volcanoes of Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. Wherever you are, have a happy Valentine's Day and stay safe. We'll see you next time on News Bits.